It is hilarious.
So, back to you.
Oh, you want me to comment on Russiagate?
That's what I want. You were the first person to alert me to the fraud in the Ukraine. You, first of all people I read, said, watch out for this. This is not what it is being made to be. And that was true.
Okay. Well, Russiagate is clearly an orchestration. We have it on no less authority than William Binney, the high-level National Security Agency official who created the NSA spy system. That if Russiagate existed, the NSA would have all of the evidence as they pick up all communications, and therefore there would be no point of Mueller's investigation.
They would just open their files.
They would just deliver the evidence, right. And since this has been going on now, what, a year and a half?
Yeah.
There's no evidence, just constant insinuations by the media, by the Democrats, and even by some Republicans. You have to say, well, what is going on? And what is going on is this. When Trump announced during his campaign for president that he was going to normalize relations with Russia, he, by saying that, threatened the power and profit of the U.S. military security complex, which has a huge budget, massive, larger than the gross domestic product of all but a handful of countries in the world.
Think of it.
So, if you have a budget that's $1,000 billion annually, you have to have an enemy. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, they lost their enemy. They recreated one by orchestrating the Muslim threat, the terror threat. But this isn't a big enough threat.
No, I mean, they don't have the arms to compare.
They don't have armies, navies, air forces, nuclear missiles, and so on. So they had to recreate the Soviet threat, which served them well for decades and decades. Mm-hmm. And so the Russian threat took the place of the Soviet threat. So that is one reason for Russiagate. You have to remember it began with John Brennan, the CIA director under Obama. He was the first to announce that there was some sort of Russian-Trump conspiracy to steal the election. So it was the CIA director who first unleashed this into the public. Also involved was the Democratic National Committee, because it was completely dominated by Hillary Clinton. And as we all know from all the emails released by the Democratic staffer, the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, worked full-time against Bernie Sanders. And they also worked against Trump by creating various kinds of allegations, sexual harassment allegations. You know, it came out just the other day in the New York Times that various of her supporters had spent $700,000 bribing women to come forward with sex harassment allegations against Trump. But we also know they spent a very large sum of money to create that fake dossier by the former British Secret Service agent who made all those allegations about Trump, and it was that fake dossier that the CIA and the FBI knew were fake, that the FBI used to get the warrant from the FISA court in order to spy on Trump.
When he was a candidate.
When he was a candidate.
And you know, just let me stop for 1 second. This is something that is not even talked about. I mean, not that we get any accurate information about this whole situation, but the fact that our own intelligence people were spying on an opposing candidate is really unbelievable.
Well, no, it's not.
No? Okay, sorry.
It's very believable.
I'm too gullible, right.
It should be unbelievable, and I think that's what you meant. It should be unbelievable, but it actually is. The security systems have been politicized for a long time. Mm-hmm. But what I think sent them to such extreme action was the threat to their power and profit of normalizing relations with Russia. Because then you've got to account for why do you have $1,000 billion annual budget? $1 trillion. Why $1 trillion? So that's and of course the media, the print and TV media have always been used by the security agencies. The security agencies essentially bring them stories, and the stories get a lot of attention and readership, and so they always run with the stories. And so the FBI, the CIA, the NSA can control the explanations that the public gets by the stories they give the media. And if you're a reporter, and I know this, for a fact, and the CIA or FBI hands you a story, it's certain that it will run and get a lot of prominence. The editor will say, well, where's your source? You'll say, the CIA. And he'll say, oh, okay. And so those reporters that cooperate with the security agencies, they get a lot of attention, and they're important to their employer, whether it's a newspaper or a TV station. So that's the story of Russiagate. But once again, to repeat, William Binney, who designed the spy system, he later blew the whistle because he thought it would never be used against Americans. But when he saw that the NSA was using it against Americans primarily, he blew the whistle. And of course, they tried to prosecute him and so on. And they said, oh, well, he's just disgruntled and so on and so on. Which is the reason that Snowden actually stole the documents, because William Binney didn't take any documents, so he didn't have any evidence to back him up, and that's why they couldn't prosecute him. But Snowden, remembering that, stole the documents and released them.
And wasn't it Binney who said they could not have been downloaded across wires as it was being accused that they were, that they had to be stolen by somebody on the scene, a DNC person? Yeah,
because of the that's right, because of the speed.
Yeah, the speed.
The speed and the size, the download speeds and the size of the files. But I think that had to do with some other documents. But anyhow, so that's what Russiagate is. So now we see that there's starting to be trouble for Mueller, for the FBI, for the CIA, because first of all, it's becoming obvious there's no evidence, and yet this thing goes on and on and on. And second, we now have all the leaked emails between FBI agents describing their plot to do Trump in. We have the New York Times story, and so on. And so it now is beginning to look like a coup against the president by the security agencies, and that Mueller is the point man. So the question in my mind, and I think it should be in everyone's mind, is why hasn't Trump ordered their arrest?
So
Trump now has clear grounds for arresting Comey, Brennan, Mueller, all the other agents involved. All he has to do is have the Attorney General indict them, put them in court, put them on trial. And yet, he doesn't do anything.
Well,
he just
why do you think?
He twitters. So the whole issue is very puzzling for that reason. Why is the President of the United States unwilling or unable or whatever it is to use the power to hold accountable people trying to discredit the President of the United States with the intention of either indicting him or impeaching him or destroying his effectiveness as a leader? So that's the real question. That's what should be.
But Dr. Roberts, hasn't the public, the media-mad public, we in this booth always talk about the two worlds, the people who watch mainstream media, corporate media, and then the people who dig, because they're two completely different worlds. The people who watch mainstream media, you would have a very hard time of convincing them that the Russiagate story was a fraud and a creation by the intelligence agencies. And the public has been totally fooled. I mean, they are so firm in their belief, and the powers that be have announced that if Trump were to try to get Mueller, he would be stopped as obstructing justice, and that would be grounds for impeachment.
No, I don't think so at all. First of all, I don't think the public is buying this story, or fewer and fewer of them are. Second, the Attorney General has more power than the special prosecutor, and if a president can be investigated, so can a special prosecutor. And we've already had various congressmen and possibly senators attacking those involved in the investigation of Russiagate in congressional hearings, and saying quite frankly that from all the evidence they've seen, this is a witch hunt against the president. So you already have members of Congress saying that publicly in well-attended and covered congressional hearings.
Okay.
So I think that if the Attorney General simply launched an investigation of Mueller, or I would simply just indict him on the evidence already, and I would indict Comey, and I would indict Obama himself and Hillary. They're all indictable because they have engaged in deceit, treason, whatever you want to say, conspiracies. So that's really the Russiagate issue. Is clearly an orchestration designed to damage the president. And so the question is, why is he permitting it?
Yeah. Oh, just let me say that you are hearing Paul Craig Roberts, Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, and Peggy wants to add.
The views and opinions expressed on KVMR are those of the speaker only and not necessarily those of KVMR management, staff, or underwriters.
We have to say that every other sentence, actually, because our program is as controversial as we can make it, I have to say.
Right.
Yes. Truthful, let's say.
I posted on my website not too long ago, a couple of weeks maybe, a link to the congressman who was attacking the deputy attorney general, Rosenstein, I think his name was, for a lack of action against a cabal working to undermine the president. He was I don't remember his name now, but it's posted on my site. It wouldn't take a whole lot of research to find it.
No, in fact, that's a good opportunity for me to say, if you want to read what Dr. Roberts is writing, go to paulcraigroberts.org. And if you want to have an introduction to 2018 that'll make you slit your wrists, it's the bad news, the baddest of bad news. It's unbelievable, and it seems to me to be totally true. Only to add one other thing, and that is, this is a little bit to the side. On Facebook, there was a cartoon that says, one person is saying, what are you expecting for 2018 besides war, economic collapse, and everything? And his answer, the person he's talking to says, flowers. And the interlocutor says, why flowers? He said, and the new guy says, because I'm planting flowers. And and it reminded me of the Aztec prince whose beautiful poem ends by saying, plant flowers. This is, anyway, just to say, your clear-sighted view of the future is not an optimistic one, but it seems to me to be realistic and accurate. Okay.
Well, when you are determined to make an enemy out of a very powerful nuclear power, that's a form of insanity. It's highly irresponsible, and it's reckless. And so it's hard to be optimistic when you see that Washington is doing everything they can to pick a fight with Russia. In fact, to get back to the question, on December the 7th, I've posted something from the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal editorial board says that Mueller should resign as special prosecutor because of his conflicts and misbehavior and so forth. And somewhere along here, there should be the article that I posted of the congressman in the, I think it's Intelligence Committee hearing.
So there would be support for Trump to move ahead and protect his flank by reacting against the intelligence, quote-unquote, community.
Oh, I think I think he's losing support because he doesn't.
Aha.
See, the people who voted for him and tried to support him, they are writing him off. So he tries to combat that with twits, you know.
They are tweets from a twit.
It's just not working. It's not working. So I think, you know, he needs to act in a more decisive way against his enemies and not just sit there. For example, today, you know, an hour or two ago, I heard on NPR they were still going on about Russiagate. Yeah. You know, repeating what they know is a lie. They know it's a lie. They're not so stupid to believe this. But it's a weapon. They won't trump out They're mad that Hillary lost. And it's when you have the DNC, the Hillary people, the military security complex, and of course
the media
repeating the same lie over and over. That's what makes ordinary people believe it. But I've seen a number of reports that people are just not buying it now, that it's just sort of when you hear about something for this long but no evidence ever shows up,
but it would be hard to know that, because that's one little half sentence in their descriptions of the interference by Russia in our elections. There's so far no evidence, but then they go right on and say we know that they did it.
Well, the congressman, I think, who got after Rod Rosenstein was Jim Jordan.
Oh, I heard him. He's a very powerful speaker.
Yeah, it was Jim Jordan, and this was in December last month, and the FBI agent who was so indiscreet as to put in emails about how they were out to get Trump, Peter Strzok, S-T-R-Z-O-K, I don't know how to pronounce that, Strzok or something, Peter, S-T-R-Z-O-K. Those emails are, completely damning. They're complete evidence. So the Attorney General has enough evidence to bring an indictment.
But it does seem that Trump is a hollow man, in the sense that he's so vulnerable to any kind of flattery or any kind of attack. He's acting. I never thought I would see any high official of the government act as stupidly and as much like a second grader, tweeting out, like you say, twits of... I find it hard to believe that he could take any serious action. And I remember always what you said before the election, and that was, he doesn't know who to surround himself with. He has no, I don't know if it's still the case, no knowledgeable professional politician people to help him move in the world of politics. He's a true amateur.
Yeah, he didn't know what to do, and all he's managed to do really is drive away all the people that supported him, like General Flynn and the guy Bannon and some of the others, and he seems to be surrounded by his enemies. Mm-hmm. So why he would appoint so many enemies, I don't know. And his Attorney General is just too weak. This was, I forget the guy's name, but
Sessions?
Sessions, yeah. The liberals were so opposed to Sessions, but he's just a weak reed. He's almost unable to do anything. He should have had a very strong man as Attorney General, and he should never have let Flynn go, because that was the end of normalizing relations with Russia. Flynn didn't do anything.
I was going to say, will you speak to that issue? The people who have been charged are charged with things that I ask, are they true crimes? When did Russia become our official enemy, that meeting with a Russian during an election is treason?
No, they're not crimes, Jeannie. Flynn is not charged with doing anything with the Russians. He's charged with lying to the FBI.
Yeah.
And whether he did or didn't, we don't know, but it's not a lie that's of any consequence. It's not. And so there's no, of course, NPR and the New York Times, they won't ever say it. They know it. That there's no evidence whatsoever of Flynn being involved in a plot with Putin to make sure Hillary lost the election. And so what Flynn got indicted for was
Not reporting a meeting, for crying out loud.
For lying to the FBI.
Yeah.
Now, we don't really know if he lied or didn't lie, or forgot or didn't forget. See, when a prosecutor can force the innocent to make a plea. And
turn in the others.
Yeah, and so and then Manafort, he was, I think they indicted him, but that was all about some fees he got as a consultant in Ukraine 10 or 15 years ago, and whether or not he reported them to the IRS. So it had nothing to do with Russia. In other words, none of the indictments have anything to do with the charges that there were a conspiracy. There was a conspiracy between Trump and Putin to affect the outcome of the election. The indictments have all to do with things unrelated. And so, which is more evidence that this thing is orchestrated and there's no basis to it. But once again, like William Binney said, if there's any evidence of it, the NSA has it. And so all of this for a year and a half is a waste of time, because NSA has it in its files. They can produce the information right straight from the files. So they haven't, so it's not there. It's not a national security issue. They can't say, oh, well, we can't tell you. So there's the evidence if it exists, and since it doesn't exist, they haven't produced it. And the probe is just to keep using the prostitutes in the media to try to smear Trump. And in my view, it's clear enough now that the real crimes were committed by Brennan, Comey, Hillary, Obama.
Yeah, for people throwing an election, Hillary should win the prize.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the primary was a perfect example of electoral fraud on the part of the Democrats.
Right.
Horrible.
So.
Yes. So we have Russiagate almost as a distraction while our president is threatening North Korea and Iran. To me, this seems a total ploy of Israel, because it's Israel that hates Iran, not
right.
I mean, what has Iran done to us? Zilch.
Nothing. No, what we've done to Iran.
Yes.
We overthrew their first democratic government. We put the Shah on them, who brutalized them. And we hated it when they had their revolution and threw us out. We've been trying to get even with them ever since. And, of course, Israel wants Iran and Syria destroyed because they support Hezbollah, the militia in Lebanon that has stopped Israel from occupying southern Lebanon. And what Trump is doing, in my view, is he's trying to make amends with the military security complex so they'll get off his case. So rather than use the power of his office to go after them, he's joining up with them. Okay, we'll get Iran, we'll get Korea. Look, I'm getting more enemies for you, more enemies. You'll get bigger budgets. So I think that's what that's about. He's showing how tough he is, and he's not soft, and he's standing up to our enemies. So I think that's that. You know, in many ways, all of this is the fault of the liberal progressive left.
Explain.
Because it was their fault, in my opinion, because they so hated Trump because he was elected by the deplorables, you know.
Yes.
Fly over America. That they joined in with the military security complex's attack on Trump.
Exactly.
And so you see where the entirety of the liberal left progressive media were working hand in glove with the warmongers.
I want to always defend the tiny coterie of which you are one of the leaders. There is Robert Perry. There are a few people who are speaking out against this whole process, but not very many. You know, to hear liberal left people siding with the CIA and the NSA and the FBI who have lied to us through their teeth for generations, it's truly a joke. But yes, they are very responsible for what we have.
Yeah, they should have just said, "Hey, wait a minute. This isn't the case. It's in our interest to normalize relations to Russia." See, I think people, they don't seem to realize the threat of a nuclear holocaust. They just don't.
No, they don't.
To understand
They don't.
that. They seem to think, oh, it's much more important to Hillary, poor Hillary, or, you know, what about poor humanity?
Well, there are many people, Dr. Roberts, who believe that we have given up our nuclear arsenal.
Well,
there are many people who believe we have dealt with that threat.
Yeah, well, they really are misinformed.
Well, that's an understatement of the year. I have never heard so many uninformed people holding forth on everything.
Yeah.
It's crucial. And so many wars start by mistake. You know, you push, and then because you're thick-headed and, as you say, blinded by hubris, which I think is the bet, that we think we can't be hurt.
Yeah.
That you keep pushing until whoops. And when you write, you say, and this is really horrifying, Russia believes that the U.S. is planning a surprise attack.
Well, that's what they say, yeah.
Well, there's only one answer that they can have to that. We've got to get you first. We're driving them to.
I know. I keep pointing that out. It doesn't seem to have any effect. I think the New York Times would be happy if they could get Trump for the whole world to be blown up.
Well, they're losing their readership anyway.
People for Hillary, they'd probably be happy we'll all die, but we'll get Trump.
And you know, here's the irony to me, is that during the election, they focused obsessively on Trump, gave him so much time in that whole process before he became the candidate, thinking that he'd be, I love this, the Dems thought he'd be an easy person to beat. So they tried to get rid of all the other candidates, and when they added up the time that Trump got versus Bernie Sanders got like 2 minutes of mainstream coverage in his whole campaign. So the mainstream media that is now attacking Trump without remorse, well, who cares if they have remorse, but they're very responsible for getting him in, making him seem like a legitimate candidate.
Well, the way I see it, Jeannie, is that Trump was the only candidate that addressed the two important issues. One was normalizing relations with a nuclear power with whom the Obama regime had raised tensions to a dangerous level. And the other issue was bringing home the jobs that the global corporations had taken from flyover America and given to Asians. And he was the only candidate that addressed these two issues, which, in my opinion, are the only two issues worth talking about.
Well, the tax bill comes in there.
Saw that and responded and voted. You know, everybody in the country voted for him except the West Coast and the Northeast Coast. And so he addressed the two things that bothered people. But he's unable to deliver for the reasons that I predicted in the beginning. He didn't know who to appoint in order to undertake such an extraordinary change in policy. He was lined up against the military security complex, and he was lined up against the global corporations. Well, you got to have some really smart, determined,
fearless,
courageous people in your government to take that on. Yeah.
And he surrounded himself with sycophants.
One or two, and he let them go.
Yeah.
So the minute, I think Trump died as president, the minute he let General Flynn go. Because it showed that on the basis of innuendo and accusations that could not be substantiated and all the rest, he wouldn't stick by his appointments. So his enemies saw that and summed him up and said, well, he's running scared. And I think that's the situation. I think he's scared, and he's running scared, and he's trying to hold on to public support with his twits.
Well, how do you see the tax bill in this scenario?
It's just a handout to the top 0.1%. What the tax bill, the main thing it does is it drives up stock prices, because the taxation of corporate income drops to 20%. So, it's cut roughly in half. So that should have a huge increase in the wealth of the top people who own all the stocks.
You don't think we'll get a lot more jobs, as Trump has promised?
You won't get any jobs, no. They tell you, if we cut the taxes, they'll bring the money home. Well, why? They don't invest here. They invest in Indonesia and China and
Africa.
And Africa, and
anywhere the wages are low.
That's right. So they're not going to bring the money home, and it's not just Trump that says that. That's probably what the entire economics profession said. That's what neoliberal economists. That's probably the Harvard faculty, the Yale faculty, the Princeton faculty,
University of Chicago,
faculty, Stanford faculty, Berkeley.
Never trust an academic economist.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but
you had been one, so I shouldn't say that.
With it's not just Trump. That's probably what they told him. And so any president that's in hot water wants a victory. And he got it passed. And again, it appeases the global corporations.
Totally. And not a Democrat. There was no Democrat who fought.
You're being beat up because you took on the two strongest forces and you didn't equip yourself with an army to deal with them, and they've got you by the throat, and you're saying, let go, I'm going to serve your interests. That's what he's doing.
So it was a kind of capitulation.
Okay, let me up. I'm going to
look at this.
Cut your taxes. Let me up. I'm going to start a war for you in Iran and Korea. And let me up. Get off my back. I'm on your side now. I think that's what it all is. I mean, maybe I'm being unfair to him, but it looks a lot like that, doesn't it? I mean, that's what it looks like.
What else can you think, really?
Yeah.
For a man who said he was going to do the quote-unquote populist things he was going to do. You have a line in the last thing I read by you, as I say, in this last batch of essays, really PCR, it's a wonder. You say politics has degenerated into fraud. And it's true. It's hard to see any honesty in any of the traditional politicians.
Well, when you have them collecting huge sums of money to bribe women to bring false sexual harassment charges. I mean, that's, the New York Times has reported that. And that's what they did they did that to Strauss-Kahn, remember?
Right,
the IMF director who was likely to be the next president of France, and we didn't want him to be president of France because he was a little bit too independent. So when he was in New York, we framed him up. We had somebody paid this hotel maid huge sums of money to say she'd been raped. And so then they let him get on the plane, and then they stopped the plane. They had the cops go and drag him off the plane in handcuffs, and they brought all these charges and destroyed his candidacy, and then they had to say, well, it was all a mistake, and let him go. So they do these things all the time. And what it's doing, Jeannie, is discrediting every woman who brings a sex assault charge, because there's so many fake ones now. So the real victims, who's going to believe them? So again, you can see they don't care what happens to real people. But I think this sexual harassment thing now is so totally discredited. It's been discredited by all this political use of it. It's a weaponized charge.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Although we do have Trump in his own words saying where he'd grab women, and that if you're a celebrity, they'll let you do whatever.
That's locker talk.
And it's BS. It's typical bullying, locker talk.
A guy like that doesn't need to grab them. They're all over him. He's got $1 billion, more than $1 billion. I mean, it's 10 or 11, isn't it? Anybody's got that kind of money, he doesn't
got all
have
kinds
a
of
woman
girls.
problem.
Right. Here's Peggy for a second.
I just have a couple of really quick questions for some of. Unfortunately, you say not that many people believe in the whole Russia thing, but everybody I'm surrounded with who watches CNN and TV all the time, they believe that that Putin is working for the oligarchs, and that they're really our enemy. So, I thought that he really was instrumental in getting rid of the oligarchs. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, well, the oligarchs were a creation of us in Israel. When the Soviet Union collapsed, essentially the United States ran the country during the Yeltsin years. He was just a stooge for us, and the oligarchs were people that we supported and Israel supported, who made sure the government lost the power of having control over Russia's resources. And they still have some oligarchs, but Putin is the one who started reining them in. Some of them are now in exile, others are in prison, others have been dispossessed of what they stole with our help and the Israeli help. And so Putin reestablished the authority of the Russian government because it had lost that.
Well, now, just let me say...
We didn't want the government to have any authority, so we turned it over to oligarchs.
Well, now you can see why our oligarchs, hate Putin so much. Because that would be a bad precedent for our own oligarchs who get richer by the day.
Yeah.
I mean, only to say, that our presidents are controlled by oligarchs as much as anybody that we're accusing of being a creature of the oligarchy.
And how about the thing that Putin is one of the richest men in the world?
That's just more made-up stuff, I think I saw a couple of years ago his true net worth was like $5,000 or something.
That's what I thought too.
A piker.
Yeah. The thing that he had, the claim that he had $50 billion. That would make him one of the richest people in the world. That's just something put out in order to try to discredit him. It's another version of sexual assault charges or sexual harassment charges.
Just untrue.
The billionaire charge.
Yeah.
Right. You notice we don't accuse any of our billionaires who are as destructive as they can be. Oh, my goodness. Dr. Roberts, it's wonderful always to have you on because you burst a lot of balloons that are filled with lies and hot air. And I know that you are appreciated because we always get comments after you've been on. And people would like to know where they can read you besides paulcraigroberts.org. I know Information Clearinghouse, you've shown up there. Counterpunch, you've shown up there.
Well, there are all kinds of websites repost my columns. That's a couple of them. Global Research, Lou Rockwell, Foreign Policy Journal. They're more than I even know about, and they get translated in most languages in the world. They're all over everywhere, and so they can probably find it. everybody just all they got to do is Google. Just Google my name. How it becomes. It's not hard to find.
It's hard to take in, really. It goes so counter. It shows you the intelligence that said, repeat a lie often enough, and it becomes a truth. We only do controversial programs on this program. But
well, Jeannie, let me say that what my experience has been since I've had this website, which only exists because readers demanded it. What my experience is that anyone that wants to know what's going on does not believe a word of CNN or any of the print and TV media. They don't believe a word of it. The only people who believe it are the ones who are too busy entertaining themselves and just watch the news to have some idea of what they're supposed to be talking about or something.
Right.
The people who watch CNN can't possibly have any interest in comprehending what's going on. That's not there. They want to. So if they go out tonight, they'll have some idea of whatever's the current topic of conversation. It's a form of entertainment, and it's a way of making you look like you're part of the group, But
they're always sorry when they bring it up at my house about Russia.
I bet.
Well, the people in this booth have alienated so many people. Not forever, I have to say. But
we dislike each other now.
Oh, yeah. We're a little coterie of fellow travelers and Putin stooges. Anyway.
Well, but you see, no intelligent person looks at it that way.
No.
And from what I can tell, my readers, they don't believe a word of the mainstream media.
No.
I'm talking about millions of people.
And I love it that you said you are reaching many more people now with your website than you reached when you were in the mainstream media.
Many times out of the New York Times.
Yeah.
Well, we just have to say with folks, well, if I agreed with you, we'd both be wrong. So, at any rate, Dr. Roberts, it's always a pleasure to have you on, and thank you for agreeing to come on. I know you're on a lot of different places and writing a lot, and I know you also want to live a life, but we love you here. I'll just say that.
Well, thank you, Jeannie. I enjoy being on with you and Peggy. I do. I look forward to the next time.